What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and as you guys know, I am somebody that it doesn't matter what draft pick I'm at, what round I'm at, I am shooting for upside throughout the entire draft because to win a 12-man league, you need a 92nd percentile outcome to win it all. So when I can, I am taking shots for maximum upside. But I think it's important to sort of get on the other side of that, change perspective, and today we're going to be zeroing in on 5 players that I think are bust proof for 2022. I think the issue is, though, that the flaw with a lot of these types of videos are people sort of lean into projected floor. So last year, Mike Davis was a guy that had a safe floor, but in reality, there was no floor at all. Mike Davis was super fragile because he was just a projection instead of a high floor player. So I sort of wanted to try my hand at looking at players that have maximum stability, but not from projection, but from a talent perspective, from a price perspective, all of that. So we're going to get into my 5 bust-proof players for 2022 in a second here. If you enjoy the video, make sure you go down below, subscribe, leave a like. Let's go.
Thirsty, thirsty, trying to choose. I know I'm critical. My nitty bag.
All right. The first guy we're going to talk about is Terry Mclaurin, who has an underdog ADP of the 409, so at that 4.5 turn as the wide receiver 21. And Mclaurin sticks out as a really safe player because I am very sure that the talent is there. And I know that it stung to have Mclaurin last year, but this season, it feels like this is a great bet to make. He has surpassed 130 targets in each of the last 2 years, and he now gets the best quarterback of his entire career. Now, I know we're talking about Carson Wentz, but you have to understand how bad Terry McLaurin's wide receiver quarterbacks have been up until this point. We are talking about Case Keenum, Dwayne Haskins, a post almost fatal surgery Alex Smith, Kyle Allen, Taylor Heineke. None of these guys are competent NFL quarterbacks besides Case Keenum. And when you look at the adjusted yards per attempt, which I think is one of the better quarterback stats out there over McLaurin's first 3 seasons, so 2019 through 2021, and you compare that to what Carson Wentz did last year, it's night and day. Those 3 years, I pretty much took the average because he had more than one quarterback every single year. That first year, he had Case Keenum and then Dwayne Haskins. So I took just Washington quarterback, whatever the average was of all the passers, what their adjusted yards per attempt was. And you came out with 6.2, 5.7, and 6.2. And if you put those numbers in 2021, they would have ranked 27th, 29th, 27th. Just really bad. We're talking like bottom 5 quarterback play. Now, in a year that Carson Wentz lost his job, so he didn't even play that well, he ended up with 7.3 adjusted yards per attempt, which was 13th in the NFL. That's a massive upgrade from a per attempt efficiency basis, which has been McLaurin's downfall this entire time. And the only quarterback that we've even seen in that realm of a Carson Wentz was when Terry McLaurin was a rookie, and in his first 8 games, he had Case Keenum at quarterback. And in those 8 games, remember, as a true rookie, 15.4 points per game, which is better than his career average of 13.4 points per game. And he was on pace for 128 targets, 79 catches, 1,200 yards, and 11 touchdowns in his first 8 games ever as a pro, just with having a competent quarterback. So we now have this opportunity where McLaurin is going to get a huge upgrade at quarterback, and it's going to suit him super well because he's one of these wide receivers where he would really benefit from having any kind of talent at quarterback because he wins downfield, right? He was top 5 in air yards. Air yards are just pretty much, how can I explain air yards? But it's pretty much just how far the ball travels when you're targeted. He was top 5 in air yards, top 5 in air yard share, top 5 in deep targets, which are targets 20 plus yards downfield, and he was 3rd in unrealized air yards, which is unrealized air yards are air yards that don't convert into actual yards. So him going downfield, getting a pass, and it just not being on target and not connecting. He had a lot of food left on the table last year. He operates as this downfield wide receiver, and you're not going to connect on a ton when you have Heineke at quarterback. And I looked at PFF. I sorted grades by sections of the field. So if we're looking at just deep passing, so throws 20 or more yards downfield, Among 37 quarterbacks, Heineke was 35th in passing grade at 60.8, and he had an adjusted completion percentage of 32.7%. Now, when we look at Wentz, again, Wentz isn't a world beater, but he was 13th in deep passing grade at 90.7. So 90.7 versus a 60.8 number. And then he had an adjusted completion percentage of 47.5%. That was almost 15% better than Taylor Heineke. So just across the board, we're getting a massive, massive quarterback upgrade on Terry McLaurin. And you couple that as well with a massive discount on him, where last year he was a 2-3 turn guy, where you took him like really, really early third in that like CeeDee Lamb, Allen Robinson area. Now we're getting him at the 4-5 turn in an area where I don't love a ton of those wide receivers. There's pretty much this tier where like after like the Metcalfs and the Judys and the Suttons of the world, that early fifth, we're talking about Bateman, Gabe Davis, Darnell Mooney, Allen Robinson. I see a pretty big tier gap from that group of wide receivers to like McLaurin, Metcalf, DJ Moore, Deontay Johnson, Sutton, Judy, if that makes sense. So he's the last guy in that area. We're getting a discount on him. And the biggest reason why I love McLaurin's floor is because he is super talented. Every year of his career, he smashed reception perception. As a rookie, he had an insane PFF receiving grade. He just checks all the boxes. He's a reception perception stud, 94th percentile against man, 94th percentile against press. He is that guy. When it comes to being an X wide receiver on the outside, we know he's going to command targets. He's going to command targets downfield, and he's going to beat whoever is in front of him. It just comes down to if that quarterback can throw him the ball and how efficient that offense can be. And I think with Carson Wentz, this will be the best offense he's had in forever. You have Antonio Gibson. You have I'm not going to speak on the offensive line, but you have, of course, McLaurin. You have Curtis Samuel. You have a first-round rookie wide receiver in Jahan Dotson. Logan Thomas might be back. So there's sort of an upward momentum for this offense to be better. And he's going to have the best quarterback of his entire career. And he's going to be the cheapest he's ever been since his rookie year. So I think Terry McLaurin is not only set up to be a super high-floor pick, but he's also set up to be a really, really solid bet to be a league winner in fantasy football. So I think he kind of has a combination of floor and ceiling. I honestly wanted to make a solo video on McLaurin for that, but I think that I covered him pretty well there. Now, as we move on to the 6th round, we're going to talk about Kyler Murray, who's going off the board at the 602 as the QB5. I don't know why I couldn't say QB5 there, but as the QB5. And the discount on Kyler this year is out of control. I don't really understand the pessimism. I know that there's like some wonky like contract talks that are up in the air with Kyler. I'm not too concerned about it, if I'm being honest. I don't understand this screenshot. This is quarterback sorted by ADP on Underdog. By the way, promo code RON if you want to hop on there and try out some best ball drafts. I don't know I don't know what calculus we're doing to get to this point where Kyler Murray is 10 picks cheaper than Lamar, 20 picks cheaper than Justin Herbert and Mahomes, and 30 picks cheaper than Josh Allen. I don't really see I don't see the point of that gap. And what we look at in terms of Kyler Murray's career output, he's going as a QB5 right now, and in the last 2 years he's never finished outside of the top 5. I'm not saying that he should be inside of the top 5, but he should at the very least be in that same tier with Lamar in my eyes. I don't know why he's going 10 picks later than Lamar. He has 2 elite top 5 seasons through his first 2 years, 22.2 points per game last season, 24.4 the year before, and he was a top 12 quarterback as a rookie. He has done nothing but produce on the fantasy football field. I don't see why we're getting the discount, and him having those 2 elite top 5 seasons as well as having a top 12 season, he's never busted. He hasn't busted this far, and there's still a ton of room left for him to grow. He still hasn't thrown over 30 touchdowns. He has double-digit rushing touchdown upside as he showed in his second year. Last year, he set career highs in completion percentage and yards per attempt, so he's sort of on the upward trajectory. And I guess the only thing you can kind of give a knock on him is that he doesn't have DeAndre Hopkins for the first 6 games. But I think Hollywood Brown is more than capable of being a number 1 wide receiver. We've seen him do it on the Ravens. We have Zach Ertz on this team. We have James Conner in the backfield. I think Kyler Murray is going to be just fine. And whatever help he doesn't get from his wide receivers, he'll make up for it by compensating with his feet. So I feel like he's a lock to finish in the top 6. I don't really see why he is not viewed in that same tier as a Lamar. But yeah, I think that his price is way too cheap, and I think he is pretty much a lock to be a top 6 quarterback in fantasy this season. He is my favorite. Like, if you're going to spend up on an elite quarterback, I don't mind doing it in the 6th round with Kyler. How I'm sort of treating that top tier is I'll have them all on my ranking sheet. I'll cross them all off and I'll take the second to last or last guy between those top 5. I don't have a confident way outside of Allen at 1. That 2 to 4 area of Mahomes, Herbert, Kyler, Lamar, you can rank those guys however you want, and I wouldn't bat an eye at it. So I'll just take the cheapest one. That is Kyler. Again, without injury, I don't see how he busts. Now, the next guy we're going to talk about is somebody that's kind of become a meme on this channel, and Josh Jacobs. And he's been somebody that I've notoriously been fading. Jacobs, even this year, isn't a guy that I'm really targeting, but his price is interesting because we keep making the same bet. He keeps having the same outcome, and he just gets cheaper every time. Now, what do I mean by that? If you look at his stats through his first 3 years, it's pretty much the same thing. 15.1 points per game, 15.4 points per game, 14.7 points per game. He hovers around 15 points per game. And that's why I don't love him at his price. Now, again, this isn't a 5 players that you must draft. This is 5 players that are bust-proof in my eyes. The reason I don't like to spend up on a Josh Jacobs, because in that round 4 to 6 pocket, that's where we're drafting next year's Cooper Kupp, next year's Jamar Chase, next year's insert young ascending wide receiver who's going to break fantasy. So I don't like taking running backs in that range, and I don't like shooting for floor in that range because 15 points per game can be replaced by players off waivers. Last year, guys who had 15 points per game, Darrell Williams, Devontae Booker, Khalil Herbert, Elijah Mitchell, Cordell Patterson, all those guys matched Josh Jacobs' production. But it's worth noting the consistency and the cost of acquisition. If we look back to his first year as a rookie, he was picked 40 off the board. Then he was picked 14 as a second-year guy, picked 53 last year, and now he's picked 62. So he keeps getting cheaper while pretty much putting up that same 15-point-per-game number he keeps on putting up. And Mike Clay right now has him projected for 921 yards on the ground and 9 touchdowns with 47 targets, 36 catches, 266 receiving yards, and a touchdown through the air for 14.3 points per game. It would be his lowest output, but he's going at the RB22. 14.3 points per game would probably have him finishing around RB 15 to 20, and that would be just fine. Now, I'll also say 37 receptions feels a little bit low after 54 last year, but I think that he's probably betting on the fact that that was a one-year instance, 54 catches, and then also the fact that McDaniels is coming in, you're getting Devontae Adams in, Josh Jacobs might not be as featured in the receiving game. Same thing with Kenyon Drake coming back. So I kind of understand that projection from that standpoint. But again, he's always a 15-point-per-game guy. I imagine he'll be a 15-point-per-game guy this season. That's why I think he has a high floor. And his role in this offense actually gets really interesting. He has Devontae Adams there, which raises the touchdown ceiling of this entire offense. It probably takes his touchdown ceiling from like 12 total to maybe like 15 to 18. Like he could really put in a LeGarrette Blount on the Patriots, fall in the end zone 15 plus times type season. And I think also with Devontae Adams there, if this offense gets any better, he could benefit from that efficiency where he's been 4 yards per carry last year, 3.9 before that, but 4.8 as a rookie. Maybe lighter boxes, they got to make up for Devontae Adams. Maybe we see him go to like a 4.5 to 5 yards per carry, which would be really good for him as well. So there's kind of a lot of outs there for him to give you that 15 points per game. So again, he's not a guy that I'm drafting a lot of, but he is for sure a guy in that 6th-round range where if you're going to take a running back, take a stab at a running back, I would rather go Josh Jacobs than a guy like Ezekiel Elliott, or I'm trying to think of other guys, but those old projection-fueled type running backs. I think I would just rather take Josh Jacobs. He's also pretty young. He's only a month older than Najee Harris, so he's interesting. I think he actually makes sense in zero RB builds, or we talked about that in the zero RB video I just made, where you're not taking a running back until after round 5. If Josh Jacobs is there in round 6, he's actually a pretty good zero RB target to start off a zero RB team. Now, moving on to the next guy, we'll talk about TJ Hockenson. And the last 2 years for TJ Hockenson, he has been the definition of a high floor guy when healthy. He is going off the board at the 7-12 this year as the tight end 7. This is all underdog ADP. Tight end 7. He has now finished back-to-back tight end 7 in points per game. So he's going off the board at tight end 7. Last year he was a tight end 7. The year before that he was tight end 7. He's probably going to be around tight end 7 again. I mean, he is a guy who isn't super efficient. He's not really great at demanding targets. He's not this freak athlete, but his best asset in fantasy and why I think he has such a high floor is his route participation. Mark Andrews' biggest issue his first few years in the league is that he was kind of splitting time with Hayden Hurst, and they might have even had like a blocking tight end that was like Nick Boyle or something that he would sort of split time with. And his biggest issue was that when he was on the field, he was commanding targets, he was being efficient, but they weren't running him on routes enough. Tight ends, a really huge component of their success is route participation. Mark Andrews, his first few years, was only in a route like 50% of pass plays. That's not enough. But when we look at Hockenson, the past 2 seasons, he's been really high in route participation. And last year, he was actually tied for second in route participation with Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews running a route on 78.3% of pass plays. So if you're tying with Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews for any stat, that's a great thing. And he's tying them for pretty much one of the most important components of tight end success, which is, are you out there running routes? So he's going to be out there running routes. Again, the issue, he's not like a freak athlete. He hasn't shown to be super efficient or command targets at a high rate, but he's going to be out there. I think he has a high floor. He's pretty much locked into like 70 catches, 700 yards, and 5 touchdowns. I know that they brought in DJ Chark and they brought in Jamison Williams. I really don't think that's enough to keep Hockenson out of running routes. I think they're just going to have competent wide receivers on the field instead of limiting Hockenson's routes. Again, this isn't a ceiling play. I think Hockenson, again, is pretty locked into like 70, 705 touchdowns. If we're talking about his ceiling, I could see this offense kind of getting better. And then you could maybe even see Hockenson, if like J-Mo doesn't get up to speed for a while and it's just Amon-Ra St. Brown out there, you can see like 85 plus catches for him. And just as a tight end with a big body, I want to say he had a pretty, he might have scored like 2 touchdowns in a game against the Cardinals as a rookie, something like that. But I wouldn't be shocked to see his touchdowns go from like 5 in a season to 8, 9, 10. That's in his range just as a big tight end that gets used in the red zone. So it'll be interesting to see. I think he has somewhat of a ceiling. I don't think he has like Mark Andrews tight end 1 in fantasy ceiling, but I think he has like tight end 4 instead of tight end 7 in his range. So that is how I feel about Hockenson. I think he's a very nice high floor tight end pick where if I miss out on those elite guys where you have the elite 5 in Kelce, Andrews, Pitts, Waller, Kittle, if I miss out on one of those guys, I don't hate going Hockenson or like Goddard in the middle rounds if I want to secure something on a team where maybe it's best ball and I need a solid onesie in there, or if I have a 0 RB team where I need to establish some kind of advantage at tight end. Now, the last guy we're going to talk about is Tyler Boyd. He's going at the 10:01 in drafts as the wide receiver 52, and he's a fun one because this is the cheapest he's ever been since he broke out as a second-year guy. And it's not like he's been disappointing or that he's burned people. He just keeps decreasing in price, not because he's been bad, but because his teammates have been so good. And when we look at Tyler Boyd's best ball win rates, which are a really fun way to kind of gauge the impact of a player at his ADP, so like cost-adjusted impact almost, where it takes into account how many Tyler Boyd teams out there won it all. And 1 divided by 12 is 8.3%, so you're expected to have an 8.3% win rate. He has, obviously, again, this is a high floor pick, not a high ceiling pick. He has surpassed that every single year. The past 2 years just barely surpassed that, but has had a fine floor. Now, they haven't been home runs, but again, Boyd is a great like single. He's been a guy who won't break your team, and he can kind of provide you some stability. So if you go with like a hyper fragile build, you just need wide receivers that can go in your flex and give you something out there. He is good in some builds where it makes sense. He's also a fun backdoor stack with like Burrow, or if you want to get on the other side of that Bills-Bengals week 17 stack where you can go like, let's say you go like Diggs, Josh Allen, Gabriel Davis, and you bring it back with Tyler Boyd. That's fun. Bonus points if you bring it back with Chris Evans as well. But I think he makes sense in some builds. Now, it's really worth noting that this is his cheapest price since 2018, right? Where we see his win rate stay stable, and every year since 2019 his ADP just keeps creeping back. It goes back like 14 picks, and it goes back 3 picks, and now it goes from pick 72 to an underdog pick 1001, which I believe should be like pick 100 or something. So we keep getting this discount, and he hasn't done anything to really deserve that outside of us just projecting Chase and Higgins for more. And I agree, I project T and Higgins for more, or T and Chase for more, but he's been a wide receiver 3 in points per game the last 3 years. He's going to be running plenty of routes. They don't have a tight end of consequence. They sort of keep everything very concentrated in this offense. So it's going to be a high-scoring offense. They have the ability to throw even more pass attempts to score more touchdowns this year. I think Tyler Boyd will be a beneficiary of that. Now, he actually has a little bit of hidden upside where Tyler Boyd is one of like a handful of wide receivers where I'd probably put Chase Claypool in that area. I'd probably put like a healthy Michael Gallup in that area. I'm trying to think of other guys, but there are wide receiver handcuffs in the NFL. Tim Patrick is another one where if one of these starting wide receivers goes down, it's not a Michael Thomas goes down and like Marcus Callaway doesn't do anything situation. There are a few wide receivers in the league that are talented enough and has shown us that they're talented enough where if they come in with one of the starters down, they will actually get a pretty good boost. And I think Tyler Boyd is one of those guys. This is a really small sample, but when they're going to pass so much and, have Jamar Chase or T. Higgins soaking up a lot of coverage and Joe Burrow doing his thing, I think Tyler Boyd becomes very interesting if either of those top two guys get hurt. We saw it last year. 2 games where T. Higgins wasn't playing. Tyler Boyd put up 17.2 points per game, was only at 11 points per game the rest of the season. Now, that's a 2-game sample. Not going to say that that is a lock every time Higgins or Chase are out, but it's worth noting that when one of them are out, he gets a pretty big usage upgrade. So that's going to do it for us today. That is 5 bust-proof players for 2022 fantasy football leagues. Now, this was a little bit outside of my comfort zone. As you guys know, I don't really shoot for floor, so I think it was probably a good exercise to sort of look through the lens of shooting for floor. But yeah, I think it's a pretty solid list. We'll hope that we kind of look back on this and none of these guys bust, but we'll see what happens. I mean, outside of injury. Now, I don't really have anything to plug, so as always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure down below, subscribe, leave a like, and I will see you guys in the next one.
I got the juice, I got the juice. Channel, Chatham's on. Foolies glad I'm home. Even my haters kinda glad I'm on. Rest in peace to my vagabond. Rapper, song, singer, suspended, subpoena from Mr. Me.